Hello, Cobbs Corner family. Happy New Year. I realize it has been a hot minute since I uploaded a new video. I hope everyone had an amazing holiday season. I hope that everyone had a great Christmas, New Year's. Took time to spend some time with loved ones. I mean, I know for me personally, I actually got to go to the Met, the Museum of Modern Art in New York. So shout out to my listeners in New York City. Let's see, I went to a concert in Stamford, Connecticut, the Stamford Palace Theater, the live orchestra of Avatar: The Last Airbender. So big shout out to Stamford, Connecticut, to the Stamford Palace Theater. If you guys are ever in the Connecticut area, definitely check out the Stamford Palace Theater. And yeah, I have really been just sort of I intentionally took the last like couple of weeks off from the podcast. The last couple of weeks of 2024, I intentionally took those few weeks off, but I'm back. I know I keep on saying it's like, oh, took some time off, but now I'm back, and they're like, oh, this is the official relaunch, but then it's my only upload for like 3 months. That won't be the case. 2025. I'm excited about this year. I'm going to continue this AFI, this forever series, American Film Institute's top 100 greatest movies of all time. I've decided I'm not going to like kind of only review the movies that are not based on books. Like I realize I just don't have the time or the temperament to sit and read all those books. I'm not saying that I'm not going to read those books, but it's just like I'd like to get this thing moving along and cover different kinds of content in the upcoming year. I'm excited for 2025. I think this is going to be a great year for Cobb's Corner. I last year I did say we were going to hit 100 episodes, and that didn't happen. So, although I'm pretty sure it's likely we're going to hit 100 episodes, we're already in the 90s. But I'm not going to speak anything. I'm not going to try to speak anything into existence too soon. If this is your first time listening to Cops Corner, then welcome. And to my returning listeners, welcome back. I'm doing something a little bit different today. You'll notice I have the camera on today, finally. And I'm actually not going to be reviewing a movie. This is not an episode of the podcast. This is a YouTube video. This video is exclusively available on YouTube. And I'm gonna be ranking all of the Marvel Cinematic Universe Infinity Saga movies into different tiers. It's gonna be ranked from S tier to D tier. I guess first a bit of context to why I've decided to do this tier list ranking, and I actually do want to hear from you guys. Like, let me know, like, should I do more tier list ranking style videos in the future? Because I'm probably planning on doing all of the Fox Marvel movies ahead in time for the upcoming Fantastic Four movie in July. So who knows? I might rank the entire DC extended universe. So yeah, let me know in the comments below. Like, should I continue to do this kind of content? Longtime listeners of Cobb's Corner will know that in 2022, when I started this podcast, I started out with the Infinity Saga. I had only done the MCU Infinity Saga. I had reviewed all of those movies. So that's Iron Man, The Incredible. My very first episode was Iron Man. I think it's still my most listened to episode to this day. Iron Man, The Incredible Hulk, Iron Man 2, Thor, Captain America: The First Avenger, the Avengers, or Avengers Assembled if you live in Europe. Um, so yeah, the Avengers, Iron Man 3, Thor: The Dark World, Captain America: The Winter Soldier, Guardians of the Galaxy, Avengers: Age of Ultron, Ant-Man, Captain America: Civil War, Doctor Strange, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, which I did both a review and audio commentary for Guardians of the Galaxies 1 and 2 ahead of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. Let's see, after that was Spider-Man Homecoming, Thor Ragnarok, Black Panther, Avengers Infinity War, Ant-Man and the Wasp, Captain Marvel, Avengers Endgame, and then finally Spider-Man Far From Home. Far From Home was also an audio commentary. It was not a formal review. So that's how I started my podcast. And, I've been for a while thinking about finally turning the camera on. Like I think some of my earlier episodes, like if you can find them, I may have one or two like video episodes. Like I realize I haven't done talk time with Morgan Cobbs in forever. So just it's kind of refreshing to finally turn the camera back on. And you can actually listen to all of those episodes, that entire Infinity Saga review series. Make sure that you go and check out all those episodes. Those are the first episodes of this podcast. If you're new and you haven't listened to those episodes, I definitely highly recommend, once you finish this video, go listen to those episodes. So I feel like after having reviewed all of those movies, I'm qualified, if I do say so myself. Not the most qualified, but I am qualified to rank all of these movies into different tiers. So that's what we'll be doing today. Before I get into the tiers, before we, actually get into the topic for today's video, I would just like to express, my condolences to anyone who has lost a friend or a family member in the wildfires. Guys, the wildfires in California, my heart goes out to the state of California. My prayers are with the, friends and family, those that are living in California, those that may have friends or family in that part of the country. Guys, do all that you can to give back and to donate to wildfire relief. Guys, I'm telling you, global warming is real. So, my thoughts and prayers are with the state of California, which ironically is where a lot of these movies are filmed too. So, with that out of the way, let's get on with it, as I always say during the during the audio commentaries. So, all right. Starting off with, let's see. Starting off with, and these are, I think, in alphabetical order, not like chronological order. We're starting them off in order of release. I am not going to do chronology. Okay, the chronology of the MCU. I'm not sure if I posted it on the Cobbs Corner podcast Instagram or not, but I do happen to own a copy of the MCU official timeline book, which I will link to in the description box below. Make sure you go and get yourself a copy if you haven't already. It's a really, really quality book. Time does not permit me the ability to actually explain the chronological order of these movies. That being said, starting off with Iron Man, 2008's Iron Man. That's a solid A tier film for me. Robert Downey Jr., he was born to play this role, I think. And, I even said in my first episode how, like, Jeff Bridges claimed that the movie didn't have an official script and that the co-stars just had to keep up with RDJ and his ability to kind of steal every scene. It's a solid introduction. You got to get that solid framework down for the origin story. Iron Man, solid way to kick off the MCU and updating the wartime period from Vietnam to Afghanistan. So, it's clearly set in the 21st century. This is kind of the universe that we're establishing straight out of the gate. Like I said, it's good. I won't say it was great. It's not as great as the movies that came after it, but, you got to pay, I do have to kind of pay my respects. So it's a solid A tier film for me. Unlike our next film, The Incredible Hulk, yikes. Man. Man, The Incredible Hulk, like, what can I say about this movie? Okay, it had some pretty good, like, cast members. Like, it had Edward Norton, okay, from Fight Club, American History X. I recently just saw A Complete Unknown. Edward Norton was great in that movie. Rumor has it that he's one of those actors that tries to rewrite the script of a lot of the movies that he's in. He tries to be actor and executive producer. So there was so much like shenanigans behind the scenes. I don't even think that there was a promotion. I think at the 2000, I want to say either 2007 or 2008 San Diego Comic Con, there was a whole panel for Iron Man. You had Robert Downey Jr., Jon Favreau, Gwyneth Paltrow. Everybody's there at the panel at Hall H, but there's not a single promotion. There's no promotion for the Incredible Hulk because there was so much going on behind the scenes with, Universal Studios and Marvel Studios, which was a fledgling studio at the time, and Kevin Feige, and then also Edward Norton just being difficult to work with. So yeah, like it's really not an exciting movie to watch. Like it's really boring. I think my second episode was The Incredible Hulk. That might be my shortest episode. The dialogue in it is just awful. The pacing is. Wouldn't recommend watching it more than 3 times over the course of your entire life. Okay. But of course, there is hope. I guess you could say these two movies, since they came out pre 2010, 2009 or pre 2009. 2009 was the year that Disney had purchased Marvel Studios. So these movies, they didn't really have their ears yet, as I once heard a tour guide say when I was doing my Marvel and DC superhero tour through New York a few years back. He said, like, those movies didn't really have their ears yet, referring, of course, to Mickey Mouse ears. So the first Marvel movie to get its ears, so to speak, was Iron Man 2. B tier. It's good. It's not Iron Man good, but, it's a good movie. I think, Marvel, they wasted no time getting a sequel out of the way with Iron Man 2. Iron Man was great. Everybody showed up, solid cast, solid hero, villain, solid origin story. Said, all right, let's follow that up with a sequel. I love Mickey Rourke. I love Sam Rockwell. Sam Rockwell, who I don't think has shown up a whole lot on screen in recent years. I think he is probably one of the more, I don't even know if underrated is the right word, because I think Sam Rockwell, I've only reviewed 2 of his films. I know he was in Iron Man 2, and then when I was doing the Change Your Life series, he was in The Way Back, which is also really good. So yeah, Sam Rockwell, solid actor. Of course, there were some behind the scenes, either between contract disputes or just, I've also heard that Robert Downey Jr. and Terrence Howard didn't have the best like on-screen chemistry. Like they had respect for each other. Like a lot of times you hear about like co-stars can't get along, or there's chaos on set and then the movie comes out bad, which we'll see in a few of our later films. That wasn't the case with Iron Man. I think RDJ and Terrence Howard, they had a respect for one another as actors, and I'm sure everybody's cool now, but they just didn't have the best on-screen, on-set like chemistry. So for whatever reason, Terrence Howard, he did not return for Iron Man 2, and he was instead replaced with Don Cheadle. There's even like a meta joke made about it during the Senate hearing. I like how with this movie they plant the seed of, now we might not have been able to really see it. Like, no, we have the benefit of seeing it in its full scope now that we are post Infinity Saga. Like now that it's post 2010, post 2016, they planted the seed in Iron Man 2 for what would eventually evolve into Captain America Civil War. Government oversight into superhero activities. Just that Senate hearing, like, yes, it's kind of like a funny scene where, we see like, oh, there's, Justin Hammer, and, he's trying to replicate the Iron Man suit. And then Iron Man's like, yeah, there's no real, threat. I successfully privatized world peace. You can't have my suit, kind of thing. But yeah, they planted that seed. And then we later find out that Senator Stern was a member of Hydra. So, that seed was planted in Iron Man 2. So again, I got to give it a B tier film. For me, it's one of those movies you kind of have on in the background when you're cleaning the kitchen, when you're doing dishes, you just have Iron Man 2 in the background. The Stark Expo, it's just such a fun it's such a fun movie. You know, we get a solid little character arc for Tony Stark. You know, him realizing that the arc reactor that's been keeping him alive is also killing him, which I think is an allegory for a darker path that they were gonna go down, the demon in a bottle storyline from the comics, which deals with like alcoholism. But of course, they had to have a lighter tone, you know, to kind of keep it PG-13. But you know, Iron Man 2, solid B tier film. I forgot to mention post credit scenes. Post credit scenes, like that's what these Marvel movies are known for. We get, you know, post credit scene from Iron Man. That's when we first see Nick Fury, director of Shield. He name drops the Avengers. Nick Fury shows up in Iron Man 2, and then post credit scene of Iron Man 2, we see Thor's hammer, which is our next film. Thor, it's like I almost want to put it as C tier, but I'm gonna be nice. I'm gonna be nice. It's a B tier film. Stellan Skarsgård is amazing in this movie as Dr. Eric Selvig. Dr. Eric Selvig. I sorry, I had like a brain fart mid sentence. You know, introducing us to Asgard. You know, you have to understand that when we say Marvel Cinematic Universe, we realize it's a whole universe. This movie, it expanded the universe beyond just Earth and established Earth as one of the 9 realms. And that Asgard is one of the 9 realms, and then, well, really Earth or Midgard is another realm, and how there's 9 realms. I like how it established magic as science that we don't understand yet. So kind of blending sort of Norse mythology and really just mythology with science fiction, and like, you know, how Arthur C. Clarke, who was an author of science fiction, he said, you know, magic is just science we don't understand yet, and you know, science fiction a precursor to science fact in some cases. You know, the acting in this movie is great. You know, introduction of Chris Hemsworth as Thor, Tom Hiddleston as Loki. Loki, who's a huge, you know, fan favorite character to this day. We got Idris Elba as Heimdall, who I feel like doesn't do a whole lot in this movie. You know, I feel like Heimdall, he does more in the later movies, but they at least set up this new environment, this new extraterrestrial realm, established like the Bifrost as the way that they're able to the way that they're able to travel between each realm, almost kind of like not hyperspace, but not not like hyperspace in Star Wars, but kind of similar if you think about it. Like, you know, Bifrost, the Rainbow Bridge, and yeah, I mean, it's a solid origin story. You got to get that origin story out of the way. We see more of Shield. We get a nice. I don't even know if it's really like an origin story for Thor, really, because like I realized Thor at this point is like 3,000 years old already, and he's already like a god. He's already the god of thunder. So, you know, again, overall B tier film. It's good. I'm not gonna say that it's great. Okay, not without its flaws. Captain America: The First Avenger. A tier. A tier. You know, I think I said in my Captain America: The First Avenger review that superhero movies are not. Uh, Superhero movies is not a genre unto itself. And how, like, at that point, the only movies I had reviewed up till then were Iron Man, The Incredible Hulk, Thor, Iron Man 2, and Captain America: The First Avenger. I think I had pointed out how Captain America: The First Avenger is really a period piece. It's really like a 1940s, you know, World War II period piece. Guardians of the Galaxy is more of like a space adventure. Uh, you know, we'll see later on how Captain America: The Winter Soldier is more of a political thriller. So yeah, so yeah, see these Marvel movies, these superhero movies, they are not a genre unto themselves. There's so much overlap. There's so many different like genres and subgenres that kind of collide with each other. in these films. With Captain America, the First Avenger specifically, again, solid origin story. You got to get that origin story. This is the first Marvel movie that is a prequel. It takes us back in time to 1942 to Steve Rogers, who tries out for the super soldier program, and Dr. Erskine, who's originally from Germany, who then I guess defects to the United States and joins the Strategic Scientific Reserve, which is the precursor to what will become SHIELD. We're introduced to Agent Peggy Carter. And yeah, I mean, just that whole transformation scene where he's like in the he's in like the transformation cradle, or I don't really know what you call that thing. And then Dr. Erskine's like, shut it down. He's like, no. And then Steve says, no, don't. I can do this. So establishing Steve Rogers as Captain America, really the world's first superhero. You know, he's like a symbol of hope, you know, in the American war effort. But really, he's the world's first super soldier. He's the world's first superhero, in fact. So we're also introduced to the Tesseract, post-credit scene of Thor. That's the first time we see the Tesseract, and we see it again in Tonsberg, Norway. I don't think they ever specify why Odin left the Tesseract in Tonsberg, Norway, on Earth with us humans after the battle that we see in the beginning of Thor. But you know, Tonsberg, Norway, Johann Schmidt, he finds the Tesseract, which we later find out is actually the Space Stone, one of the 6 Infinity Stones. So we get a nice bit of world building and expansion that, of course, will not come to fruition for a couple years. But you know, Howard Stark, we see Howard Stark, yep, Tony Stark's father, just in the Stark Expo. Dominic Cooper did his thing as, I guess, the younger version of Howard Stark. It's unclear. He's maybe a man in his early 30s, but I guess, judging by the later films, maybe Howard Stark was an old dad. Like he was probably I guess in his 50s when he had his son Tony, but you know, because he's played by John Slattery, who's, you know, much older. But yeah, Dominic Cooper did his thing, and just seeing sort of the way he moves, the way he carries himself, and like, yeah, I could definitely see Tony Stark as the fruit of this man's loins. But yeah, overall, it's A tier. It is A tier. I put it on par with Iron Man in terms of, I guess there are kind of similarities. A lot of times Marvel, what they'll do is they'll take the hero and then they'll just kind of make the villain do exactly what the hero does, except they're evil. So they do that a lot with their movies. I think it kind of works in Iron Man and Captain America, the First Avenger. Also, the mentor figure gets killed. So yeah, there was some slight, not so much copy and pasting, but I do see a lot of similarities between those two movies, and it's on, and how perfect that Iron Man and Captain America would go on to lead separate factions of the Avengers in a later film, which we will see soon. And then to close off Phase 1, we got the Avengers. The Avengers, I'm gonna put that as A tier as well. You know, the Avengers, that's the movie where we finally bring everybody together. Like, I don't think any new characters are introduced in the Avengers, and this is something I've realized as I've like rewatched it again and again over the years. I realized that, you know, in Iron Man, we're introduced to Tony Stark, Iron Man, as well as Agent Coulson, who dies in the Avengers, and Nick Fury shows up in the post-credit scene. The Incredible Hulk, we're introduced to Bruce Banner, the Hulk, who in that movie is played by Edward Norton. He was later recast. They later recast Mark Ruffalo to play the Hulk. So we have same character, different actor. And so yeah, that was the Incredible Hulk. Iron Man 2, we're introduced to Black Widow. Iron Man 2, we're introduced to Black Widow. We see more of Coulson as well. Thor, we're introduced to, the titular character, Thor, but also Dr. Eric Selvig, who will be an ally in future films. Oh, and Hawkeye, although he doesn't really do much in that movie, and he only has a few lines. Captain America, the First Avenger, we're introduced to Captain America. So, yeah. Oh, Thor, we're also introduced to Loki. I guess technically the only new character that's introduced in this movie is Thanos, who doesn't show up until the post-credit scene. But I feel like, I think in 2012, I didn't really know who Thanos was. Like, I remember watching this movie in theaters. Like, I remember it was super huge. Like, it was a huge thing when it first came out. I think that was when the Avengers came out. Like, that was when superhero movies had entered like mainstream pop culture. Like, it's no longer considered like uncool or nerdy to be a fan of superheroes, to be a fan of superhero movies. Like, now it's a part of the zeitgeist. It's a part of pop culture. Like, it was a whole moment in pop culture history back in 2012. And I remember seeing it in theaters twice. The second time we stayed for the post-credit scene. I didn't, well, the mid-credit scene, I realized, I didn't realize until years later that there actually is an end credit scene of everyone just sitting eating shawarma. And Chris Evans is covering his face because he grew out his beard for the movie Snowpiercer. But overall, this movie is A tier. It's a fun watch. We start to see the shared universe of like Marvel characters. And the thing I like about the MCU, and this is kind of, I guess, where the DC extended universe kind of failed, and where I'm hoping that, please, James Gunn, do not make the same mistake. The MCU was able to establish all these characters in their own separate origin stories, their own separate films. Of course, not everybody got their own film. We didn't get a Black Widow film until later on, and Hawkeye didn't get his own series until 2021. So, but, establishing these characters in their own separate franchises and then bringing it all together. So, Joss Whedon did his thing as the director. And, now the Avengers are out there in the world. Now the whole world knows that the Avengers exist. And, SHIELD exists as well as an intelligence organization. So there is one scene where I guess it must have been either the senator from New York or the New York City mayor, governor, somebody, one of the officials saying that the superheroes need to be held responsible for the damage done to the city. This is another, all right, seed that's planted for Captain America Civil War. Holding superheroes accountable for what they leave behind. That I've noticed that after like 15 rewatches. Okay, it's fine if you didn't notice that. The Avengers, it's an A tier movie for me. Iron Man 3. Oh, and actually, the Avengers. I think that's the only MCU movie. Well, one of two MCU movies that I own on DVD. So, Iron Man 3. I'm going to put that as a B tier film. I like Iron Man 3. We got to get a deep look into Tony Stark and who he is. And we realized that he is just a man in a suit, even though he is technically Iron Man. At the end of the day, he is a man within a suit. And it kind of gave us a starker look at what it takes to actually be a superhero. And he's suffering from PTSD from going into the wormhole. And then I do think that Ben Kingsley's role as the fake Mandarin was kind of a letdown. I think Ben Kingsley, great actor. Guy Pearce did his thing as Aldrich Killian. So it has some solid villains, but I think that, again, they kind of wasted Ben Kingsley's role. introduced us to Iron Patriot, who, well, I guess War Machine, which rebranded as Iron Patriot, which I guess didn't last beyond that film. So one of the big complaints I've heard about Iron Man 3 is, where is Shield? Now that like the president is being captured, where is Shield? I saw Iron Man 3 in theaters. I think it's a good film. It's not Iron Man good. It's not the Avengers good. You know, we were just coming off of the Avengers. It's like to kick off the phase 2 of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And I think Kevin Feige had even said in an interview how the end of one phase is solidified with an Avengers film. That marks the end of a phase. So, you know, we had just come off of the Avengers. So Iron Man 3, I think it's a fun Christmas movie. Watch it around the holidays. You know, it's fun for the whole family. You know, Tony blows up all his suits. It's the last solo film that we get for Tony Stark. You know, overall, solid movie, solid B tier movie. I will say that 2013 was not the best year for Marvel because our next film. Oh, wait a minute. I'm just now realizing that I made a mistake by putting. I put Thor: The Dark World as B tier instead of Thor. That's wow. It's my bad. Why didn't any of you speak up? What's your problem? Like the video. That's another D tier film. That's another yikes. You know, Thor: The Dark World. I don't really know if there's a whole lot I can say about this movie. I mean, Malekith is just like, I don't even know if I can call him a D tier villain. He's just like E or F tier villain. All right, he was just awful. Okay, the whole with the worlds colliding and the convergence and going through the portals and stuff, like it just didn't work. And apparently the director Patty Jenkins left the movie like halfway through because halfway through like production or something because the script was terrible. And overall there was a little bit of shenanigans happening behind the scenes. And in 2013 we got Thor: The Dark World. That's another movie I would recommend. Don't watch it more than like 3 times in your life. In the end of the movie, Loki fakes his own death, and then now he's posing as King of Asgard. And I don't know. This movie is kind of torturous to watch. So, I'll let you guys check this movie out at your own risk. I will say that the post-credit scene, we do see Tanalir Tavan, the Collector, played by Benicio del Toro. He shows up again in Guardians of the Galaxy. And they leave the Ether, which we then find out is the Reality Stone, with the Collector. And the Collector, he says, why not keep it in your own vault? And the reason for that is because they've already got an Infinity Stone, the Space Stone, in their vault on Asgard. So this is the first time that we hear the word Infinity Stone. But I guess that's really the only like positive impact that Thor: The Dark World, if you can call it that, if you can call it a positive impact that this movie had on the MCU. Again, wouldn't recommend watching it more than like maybe 3 times. So 2014, this was the turnaround year. Bam! Captain America, the Winter Soldier. A tier. I'll put it as A tier. It's A tier. It's like almost S tier. Almost. Like I said, it's a political thriller. Captain America, Steve Rogers, he is the man out of time. He's the man who was frozen in the ice for 70 years, and he's woken up in the 21st century. I guess about the year. Well, Captain America: The Winter Soldier, it takes place in the year 2014, and now he has to live in the 21st century and just kind of catch up with everything that he's missed for those like 70 years that he was frozen in the ice, and just having to live in the 21st century, adjusting to the times, adjusting to the way that the world is run. He's kind of thrown himself back into the service, and he's doing missions with Shield now, and that's kind of his life 2 years uh, post saving the world in New York in the Avengers. Finds out that Shield was overrun by Hydra. We're introduced to Sam Wilson, who is the new Captain America, who we shall see in the upcoming Captain America: Brave New World, which hits theaters on February 15th this year. I think it's February 14th or 15th, whatever that Friday is. Solid A tier film. I mean, come on, Bucky. The scene where they had to like shut down those helicarriers. We do see Camp Lehigh, which is the same training camp where Steve Rogers was trained at. So yeah, it's a solid A tier film, but I will say that the pacing in some parts is like kind of slow at times. It does have Robert Redford, who he plays Secretary Alexander Pierce, and longtime film scholars will know that Robert Redford was in the movie All the President's Men, which I think is about Watergate. I think All the President's Men is on the AFI list, so I will probably get to that movie at some point. Stay tuned for that episode in the future. There's a shot of outside the Triskelion, which is the SHIELD headquarters in Washington, D.C., outside the Triskelion, where you can see the Watergate Hotel off in the distance. So this definitely was giving like Watergate vibes. Like I said, it's a political thriller. It's not S tier, but gotta give credit where credit is due. Solid A tier film. But I'll tell you what is our first S tier film: Guardians of the Galaxy. Whew. James Gunn's MCU directorial debut. Oh, I also forgot to mention that Captain America: The Winter Soldier was the Russo brothers' Marvel directorial debut. They went on to direct Captain America: Civil War, Avengers: Infinity War, and Avengers: Endgame. So, Guardians of the Galaxy, this was James Gunn's MCU directorial debut. Again, it's like when you have a team of superheroes, like you don't have to always do a separate origin story for each character. I mean, they kind of did that with Peter Quill. We do see Peter Quill's mom die when he's, I don't know, maybe about eight years old, and then he gets abducted by the Ravagers. This movie deals with the Power Stone, so it's another Infinity Stone. This is the third Infinity Stone that we see, and then him ending up getting arrested by the Nova Corps, and then while incarcerated at the Kiln, he crosses paths with Gamora, who's the adopted daughter of the Mad Titan Thanos. We actually see Thanos for the first time. Well, technically not for the first time, but we see Josh Brolin as Thanos for the very first time. And he doesn't really do much in this movie, but Lee Pace's Ronan, Ronan the Accuser is such a like, not S tier, but maybe A tier villain for me. And we see how Thanos is kind of like the proxy. He's sending out proxies. Like, he sent Loki to get the Space Stone. He's sending out Ronan to get the Power Stone. And like we're starting to see like the universe expand. Like, this was like, I know I said that Thor was when we saw a different realm for the first time, but Guardians of the Galaxy, this is the first time that we actually go to like other, if I'm not mistaken, this is the first time that we go to other planets. Like, not just like the realms, but we actually see Xandar and Morag. Yeah, we see Xandar and Morag. Like, the movie opens up on Morag. So we get a nice bit of like universe expansion from James Gunn. So thank you, James Gunn, for directing those Marvel movies. And I can't wait to see Superman in theaters this July. Guardians of the Galaxy, S tier film. S tier. Solid ending too. It's probably I don't know if it's my favorite ending of a Marvel movie, my favorite final battle per se, but just seeing all the Ravagers come together and save Xandar, and then the Guardians of the Galaxy, we see Peter Quill hold on to that Infinity Stone, and solid film. 2015, Avengers: Age of Ultron. I'm gonna put that as a B tier film because this movie. I think this was when we started to see that these movies have consequences. Not everybody wins all the time. Like we see that Quicksilver dies, and there's a ton of collateral damage from the people of Sokovia because regular people can't survive like rocks being dropped on them and like buildings falling down and stuff. So I mean, this movie we see that. Well, I guess taking it back to Captain America: The Winter Soldier, we saw how Shield fell. There is no more Shield, so the U.S. intelligence apparatus is a bit in shambles. So there's no Shield oversight. So the Avengers are pretty much free agents now, and Tony Stark, he goes ahead and puts together Ultron, and then we later find out that it was the Mind Stone. That's what kind of made Ultron crazy to begin with, and then them having to fly over to Sokovia to kind of stop Ultron, like, and I guess to fight what is known as the Battle of Sokovia. The Battle of Sokovia in the official MCU canon, a battle that did not happen. It's the Avengers stopping an Avengers level threat that they created themselves. So there was a lot of collateral damage, a lot of innocent lives were taken. So I think that this was when we started to see that these movies are going to have consequences. Not everybody's going to win all the time, and even if the good guys do win, there are those who they were unable to save in the process. So I think that the Avengers: Age of Ultron, that was when the international community started to kind of wake up. But I don't know. Overall, this movie just as a sequel, it's just that trope of like the sequel's usually not as good. It's like maybe I'm just comparing it to the first Avengers film and then to Infinity War and Endgame, but Age of Ultron, it's a solid rewatch every now and again. Not a D tier film. That's definitely not D tier. It's kind of right in the middle. Yeah, but right in the middle. It's not great, but it's not terrible either. So Ant-Man, that'll be our first C tier film. I mean, look, I do like a good heist film, and I like the way that they made Hank Pym. Well, no, Scott Lang, this kind of like sort of street level hero, like sort of just the everyman who had just gotten out of prison and is trying to live his life right. He's trying to get a job, and then Hank Pym gives him that second chance at life. But I just don't like the way, and I mentioned it before. I just don't like the way that Marvel will always, not always, but sometimes they will take their heroes and then they will give them a villain that does everything that the hero does except they're evil for some reason. Like they always do that with their heroes, and Ant-Man is a prime example, with Darren Cross. I think I've even heard people compare Ant-Man to Iron Man as well. But maybe it's just because like both Obadiah Stane and Darren Cross are both bald, but and I think the acting is good. Paul Rudd is a great actor. Paul Rudd, Evangeline Lilly, T.I., Michael Douglas. Everybody's on their P's and Q's. I guess instead of like universe expansion per se, like this movie showed us a smaller side of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. We got to see the quantum realm for the first time, so planting that seed of the quantum realm, which will be an essential part of Avengers Endgame, well, Ant-Man and the Wasp, and then eventually Avengers Endgame. So it gave us the quantum realm, kind of a microscopic universe. I'm curious now to see with the upcoming Fantastic Four, are we going to see the quantum realm in Fantastic Four? Because I know in the comics, I think Reed Richards, he experiments with the quantum realm, but it's not called that in the comics. And you know, diehard Marvel fans, feel free to correct me in the comments if I'm wrong. It's my understanding that in the comics, it's not called the quantum realm; it's called like the negative zone or something like that. So yeah, I wonder, are we going to see the quantum realm show up in Fantastic Four or in Avengers Doomsday? Who knows? But yeah, Ant-Man, it's an okay film. It's okay. It's okay. You know, not saying don't watch it, but maybe watch it like once or twice. It's an okay watch. It's it's not knock your socks off. That was kind of the low point that Phase Two ended on, but it did leave us with a post credit scene that, well, a mid credit scene that was a teaser for Ant-Man and the Wasp, and then an end credit scene that was a teaser for our next film, Captain America Civil War. S tier film. Like I said with Avengers Age of Ultron, these movies have consequences. Not everybody wins all the time. I mean, the whole premise is there's an attack in Lagos, Nigeria, where the Avengers are like trying to clean up Hydra. They find I think his name is Crossbones. He's played by Frank Grillo, and he tries to blow himself up, but then Scarlet Witch stops him and then throws him into a building that was housing a bunch of, I guess, Wakandan outreach workers who were on a diplomatic mission from Wakanda. So we do get a teaser for Black Panther. We did first hear about Wakanda, and although they don't say it by name, vibranium in Avengers Age of Ultron. So, like the amount of innocent lives that the Avengers are taking, the amount of innocent blood that's being spilled all around the world, and with zero accountability, and of course, given Iron Man's background of when he was developing weapons for the U.S. military, he had witnessed a system of zero accountability and, having to watch young Americans get killed by the same weapons that he built to defend them in the first place, realizing that these terrorists were using his weapons. It's kind of this, it's not the same thing, but we can see Tony Stark's, why Tony Stark supports the Sokovia Accords. Like we do see William Hurt, R.I.P. The late William Hurt, who was the original actor of Thaddeus Ross. He played Thaddeus Ross in, or the I guess then General Thaddeus Ross in The Incredible Hulk, who is then appointed Secretary of State. He plays Secretary Ross in Captain America: Civil War. He shows up to Avengers HQ and tells him, and then shows him footage of the Battle of New York, the helicarrier situation in Washington, D.C., Battle of Sokovia, and then Lagos. And I want to say overall like 300 casualties, 300 civilian casualties over the course of all, I guess, 4 of those attacks. All 4 of those attacks, about 300 civilian casualties took place. So, which I know kind of sounds like a lot, but like in the grand scheme of things, I guess it's not that much. So yeah, Secretary Ross, he kind of spells it out for him. This is something the governments of the world cannot tolerate. And Iron Man's like, look, there may be a time where we need to be together and where we need to be, together as a team, and we need to get deployed somewhere fast. So we need to sign this contract. But of course, Captain America, he remembers what happened with Hydra. He remembers what happened with, finding out that S.H.I.E.L.D. was overrun by Hydra. So he kind of doesn't trust governments. He doesn't really trust, government entities. They might have ulterior motives. So he's, of course, resistant. But then Iron Man just comes with the team, of course. I mean, introducing Spider-Man, introducing Tom Holland's Spider-Man, introducing, Chadwick Boseman, T'Challa, Black Panther, rest in peace. He comes with the team. He's got Rhodey, Black Widow. So yeah, Iron Man, Vision. Iron Man came with the team, though. I'm not saying that Team Captain America wasn't stacked either. But Iron Man was not playing around. That airport battle is still one of my favorite battles in the MCU. Of course, there's Baron Zemo, who I feel like took the backseat in this movie to the whole choose a side trend, the whole like Captain America Civil War. Like the real villain, of course, was Zemo, who's a sympathetic villain because he lost his family in the Battle of Sokovia. Really, like I said in Avengers: Age of Ultron, like these movies have consequences. Not everybody wins. This is, I think, the only MCU movie where nobody wins. There's no clear winner. I mean, War Machine, he falls out of the sky and is paralyzed from the waist down. He has to relearn how to walk. And then, Bucky's metal arm gets shot off. And at that point, the Avengers don't exist. Steve Rogers, he could have killed Tony Stark when he had him pinned down, had his shield raised, but he, in that moment, decides just to disable his armor, and then he just leaves that shield behind. Iron Man's like, you don't deserve that shield. Steve's like, here, take it. So yeah, I mean, that movie, it teased Black Panther, it teased Spider-Man Homecoming, but nobody wins in the end of that movie, I think. This is just my interpretation. Nobody won. Zemo still ended up in prison. The Avengers don't exist. Both Cap and Tony ended up with injured allies. Like kind of their closest friends. Well, their best friend, really. I mean, we see how Tony and Rhodey, they're best friends, and then Steve and Bucky are best friends. Both Captain America and Iron Man ended up having their best friend injured. So yeah, in a Civil War, there's really no one clear winner. Both sides hands are dirty from that war. But yeah, S tier because of the consequences, impact that movie had. Doctor Strange, A tier. I think Doctor Strange is probably one of the more underrated MCU films. Another movie that's, again, been compared to Iron Man. I know. Doctor Strange goes from being like the world's best neurosurgeon to then having to become a master of the mystic arts. I did like the ending, the whole like Dormammu, I've come to bargain, the whole Groundhog Day sequence where I forget exactly how many times we actually see that sequence play out on screen, but it's implied that they just stayed in that time loop for like hundreds times more. Ugh. Can I learn how to hundreds times more? At least 100 more times. There's more times that we didn't see on screen in that movie. But I think Mads Mikkelsen is a perfect villain actor, but I think they might have wasted his character a little bit. I want to say Doctor Strange is the shortest MCU film. I think it's only an hour and 40 minutes. And it introduced us to the mystical side of the MCU. So solid bit of world building and like the three sanctums. It's later confirmed in Avengers Endgame that the Ancient One was fighting at the New York City sanctum. She was fighting the Chitauri off screen. So they kind of retconned her in there in Avengers Endgame. So yeah, Doctor Strange, check it out. Solid A tier film. Benedict Cumberbatch is amazing in this movie, alongside Rachel McAdams. The acting is solid. Solid script. It's kind of straight to the point. Doesn't waste any time. It's not too long. Check it out. And then, because then, like with Avengers Infinity War, I just love the banter between Iron Man and Doctor Strange. So like, definitely check out check out Doctor Strange. It's on Disney Plus. Dare I say the first one was better than Multiverse of Madness? Maybe that's a controversial take. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. Volume 2 is also A tier for me. I think the reason I put Guardians of the Galaxy as S tier and Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 as an A tier film is because Volume 2's pacing is different. Like I guess the pacing is slower, and I feel like a lot of sequels might do this. They might try to they might overcompensate, try to one up the first movie, and then they just kind of end up like crashing and burning. This movie doesn't entirely crash and burn. I still think that it has a solid ending, and it's got a nice like little like Father's Day type of vibe. Kurt Russell is Ego. Kurt Russell is the kind of secret villain. Great. Kurt Russell, who I think has said in recent years that he's gonna retire from acting soon. So but Kurt Russell did his thing in this movie. Chris Pratt. We get some nice character development for Chris Pratt. I say Chris Pratt. Peter Quill, Peter Quill, guys. Bear with me. It's a nice, but yes, perfectly. We get perfect world building and expansion and character development for Chris Pratt, the actor playing the character, not the character himself. Yeah. So Chris Pratt finds out that he is half celestial. All right, and I like how they made the actual planet Ego, and we actually get to see sort of the actual planet instead of just like a planet with a face on it. I will say that, of course, in the middle of the movie, after everyone kind of breaks off into like their own different like groups, that's when the pacing slows down. We get that whole scene where Rocket and Yondu are hopping through all those jump points. Thank you again, James Gunn, for that bit of world building, all the jump points, and then we get that scene with Drax and Mantis, and then the argument between Quill and Gamora about how like, Quill's like, I finally found my family. Why can't you just be happy for me? And and then Gamora just kind of storms off, and then just gets North by Northwested by Nebula. So yeah, there's a lot going on in this movie, I think, but it all comes together in the end. So honestly, I'm actually gonna move it down to B tier. Yeah, I'm gonna move it down to B tier. It's not a bad movie, but it's not the first one. It's not as good as I just knocked over the microphone. Not as good as the first Guardians of the Galaxy. The first Guardians is like S tier, but classic example of like the sequels just not as good. So that's okay, I think. Spider-Man Homecoming. I'm going to put that right next to Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. I like the way that they made Spider-Man this sort of working class hero. And the movie's, it's not an origin story. I like how they skip the origin story. It's like, look, we already gave you the origin story with Tobey Maguire, with Andrew Garfield. I like how they established him as a character, as a street level hero within an already established universe, and how like the Battle of New York has already happened and he's already communicating with Tony Stark, and it was a nice coming of age tale. We see that Peter Parker, he says like, "Oh, I feel like I should be doing more. I feel like I could be getting more involved." And Tony's constantly telling him like, "No, just stay where you are." And then even after Tony defeats the Vulture in the end, he still says, "No, I'm not ready to join the Avengers." So nice little coming of age tale. We get to see John Favreau as Happy. Yep, John Favreau as Happy Hogan in that movie. You know, I saw it in the theaters and I loved it. So solid B tier film. Big shout out to Tom Holland. You know, Tom Holland, great actor. I'll say he's the best Peter Parker. I won't say he's the best Spider-Man. He's the best Peter Parker. Michael Keaton is phenomenal in this movie. Okay, he's played Batman, Birdman, Vulture. Okay, I mean, you know, going from Batman to the Vulture. You know, at some point I'm going to watch Birdman. But Michael Keaton's great in this movie as sort of a Walter White like character. Like we're introduced to him in the movie as kind of a straight man. Like he's just a salvage operator, and he's about to have like the biggest score of his life. He brought in a whole new crew. He brought in bought new trucks for that job. After the Battle of New York, the whole cleanup. He's just a part of the cleanup crew. He's just making a living. Going straight. Going steady. And then the feds come in and shut him down. The whole Department of Damage Control comes in and shuts down the his salvage operation. And so then, of course, he ends up turning to that life of crime. He ends up having to, steal from DODC and just like, superhero attack after superhero attack. He ends up having to, steal weapons and like leftover technology from these battles in order to feed his family. So yeah, he's kind of like a Walter White Breaking Bad sort of character. It's like we barely hear him raise his voice. Like he's actually introduced as kind of a decent guy. He's kind of a decent guy who just fell on hard times. So he really is a villain with justified motives, and I think he works so well as a villain because he's kind of a street level, maybe mid tier villain. Like he's not like a common criminal. Like he's not like a common criminal, petty theft kind of guy. But he's also not Thanos either. He's not like a world threatening like universe level villain either. He's big enough to be on Spider-Man's radar and like the FBI's radar, but he's not on the Avengers radar. He's not on Nick Fury's radar. He's not on the Avengers radar. So nice, solid, I guess mid level villain, and this is kind of a mid tier movie as well. Thor Ragnarok. Whew. Yeah, we finally get a breath of fresh air after Thor's 1 and 2. Thor 2 was trash. So we got a new director in the director's chair. We got Taika Waititi, and he was able to work his magic with Thor Ragnarok, directing and starring in Thor Ragnarok, and they're able to just break the mold of this like Shakespearean like prince. They really just like took it and just kind of turned it on its head. Cate Blanchett's great in this movie as Hela. Solid acting, solid screenplay. We get a nice bit of world building because we see Sakaar, we're introduced to Valkyrie, we're introduced to more backstory about Asgard and how Odin actually like was a land conqueror, and how Hela was the first one to wield Mjolnir. It's overall it's just a great film. and it introduces us to Hulk. They destroy Asgard. We realize Asgard is not a place; it is a people. Jeff Goldblum. Jeff Goldblum. I mean, need I say more? Thor Ragnarok was definitely the movie that revived the Thor franchise. Definitely brought us back. You know, I definitely think that it's the best. Still, even after Thor: Love and Thunder, which they kind of overdid it, but Thor Ragnarok is still to me the best Thor movie. So S tier film, and then of course Black Panther. Whew, Wakanda forever. All right. Again, R.I.P. to Chadwick Boseman. This movie had a stacked cast. I mean, you got Chadwick Boseman, Lupita Nyong'o, Danai Gurira, Forrest Whitaker, Michael B. Jordan. I forget the name of the guy who plays Agent Everett Ross. You know, the cast, the music, the message, the setting. I mean, this was another just moment in pop culture. 2018. I'm so glad I got to see this in theaters opening weekend. It was just such a great movie. Just the whole scene where there's the second challenge ceremony and we see, Killmonger, he's taking off his shirt, he's saying like I killed everywhere in America, Afghanistan, Iraq. Like I took blood from my own brothers and sisters right here on this continent just so I could kill you. So yeah, I mean, like, they legitimately had me scared in the theater. Killmonger, he is a like top tier villain. Villain with justified motives. Seeing all this injustice in the world, particularly the anti-black racism in the world, and realizing that Wakanda is a country that has the power to liberate and arm oppressed people. So 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 yeah, just like him having those justified motives, and it's like you can't help but root for him at some point. You can't help but see where he's coming from. And I really, really love what they did with this movie. I put it as A tier for, of course, its cultural significance, representation, and all that. Again, rest in peace to Chadwick Boseman. But it's not our next film. It's just not Infinity War. Like Infinity War, I would even put Infinity War above Guardians of the Galaxy, Captain America: Civil War, Thor: Ragnarok. Like I think Infinity War is still to this day my all-time favorite MCU film. I think it's the best, the best MCU film, if not maybe just one of the best MCU films. It's probably, like, for me, just one of the greatest movies ever. Like I know we're doing the AFI series now. Like I feel like we're gonna look at this movie 20, 30 years from now the same way we look at classics like The Godfather, like Psycho, like Citizen Kane. This movie. I mean, it's literally about Thanos. Thanos is literally the villain protagonist. He set out to, collect all 6 Infinity Stones. That was his goal. Said I'm gonna collect all 6 of these Infinity Stones, and I'm gonna snap my fingers, and I'm gonna wipe out half of all life in the universe. And that's exactly what he did. And then as soon as he was done, like he literally said, like, I will finally rest and watch the sunrise on a grateful universe. Like he literally was just chilling. Like he portaled over to that planet. He just sat down. He was watching the sunrise, and then he just finally smiled. Like he was chilling. And then the credits roll, and I'm like, what? I will never forget the silence in the theater. You see, you can't recreate that moment. There's nothing like the first time that you watch Avengers Infinity War. And I'm so glad I got to see it in the theaters. Because that, again, that was a moment in pop culture history. You know, the villain won. I know I said that Civil War was the first Marvel movie where nobody won in the end. It was just a draw. But Infinity War, the villain actually wins. You know, Black Panther, it's like, yeah, sure, Killmonger, he's got, you know, justifiable motives and all, but he loses in the end. Infinity War, Thanos, another villain with justified motives, you know, overpopulation, and it's really scary with things scary today with things like climate change and like can the earth sustain 10 billion people? I did go to a conference in London in 2019 where the two themes were will AI benefit humanity and can the earth sustain 10 billion people? Like 10 billion people, that's going to happen at some point. So, I mean, it's very relevant. And, you know, of course, you know, Thanos was the villain. He had his ways, and he was a villain. He had his ways, but of course, he's the hero in his own story. And really, it's his narrative. He's the hero in that story. He was very clear, very specific. Said, "Hey, you know, I'm gonna collect all 6 of these Infinity Stones, snap my fingers, wipe out half of all life in humanity, wipe out half of all life in the universe, and then I'm chilling." And then they had to, and then in Avengers, and then in Avengers Endgame, they just had to pull up to his house and interrupt this man's dinner. So cliffhanger ending. And then we got Ant-Man and the Wasp, and I'm like, huh? Ants. All these darn ants. Like, that's gonna be a C tier movie for me, ladies and gentlemen. Cause all these darn ants and you know the introduction of Ghost. I mean, sure, the movie did introduce Ghost. We do get to see Michelle Pfeiffer as Janet Van Dyne. But I feel like this movie just really was more of a side story that just didn't do a whole lot for the MCU. Like, yes, it's specified in Avengers Infinity War that the reason why Hawkeye and Ant-Man are absent from that movie is because they were on house arrest after the whole Accord situation. They turned themselves in, and in exchange for pleading guilty, were sentenced to 2 years of house arrest so they could be with their families. Like, even in the opening scene of Avengers Endgame, we see that Hawkeye was on house arrest still when Thanos snapped his fingers. So, yeah, Ant-Man and the Wasp, we see that Scott Lang is, you know, on house arrest and just kind of spending time with his daughter on the weekends. And, you know, I mean, I guess it's a fun movie, but I just feel like it doesn't really add a whole lot. Didn't really add a whole lot to the MCU. We do know that Scott Lang gets trapped in the quantum realm because Hank, Hope, and Janet all got dusted. So he gets stuck in the quantum realm. And then the end credit scene is like all we see is like the big ant playing the drums. Like, okay, what? so yeah, it's I don't know. Maybe watch it every now and again, but I don't know. I feel like this movie just didn't really do it for me. Captain Marvel. This is another Marvel movie where it's a prequel, but it's kind of a filler movie. Put it as a solid B tier film. I did like sort of the period piece aspect to it. Like, it's set in the 90s. We got to see Samuel L. Jackson with hair. We got to chronologically, since Captain Marvel takes place in 1995, chronologically, Captain Marvel is the very first time that we see Nick Fury on screen. And it's the only movie where we see him without his eye patch. Because we do, the movie does explain how Nick Fury lost his eye patch, where he got the name Avengers from with the Avengers Initiative. Introduction to Captain Marvel. who does show up in Avengers Endgame. Introduction to Brie Larson. We do see Clark Gregg as Agent Coulson, so we do see a young Coulson. We see a young Nick Fury. You know, we do get some solid. We do get a solid story out of it. A solid kind of like not so much fish out of water story, but almost kind of like Thor. Now that I think about it, Marvel crashing to Earth, and Thor being sent to Earth and landing in New Mexico. So yeah, I mean it does have kind of its similarities to other films. We do see the Kree home world of Hala. We see a younger version of Ronan the Accuser, who is also played by Lee Pace in this film. And yeah, we introduced to the Skrulls, the Kree. You know, it's a fun standalone movie. I'm not saying that I have seen it a million times and that it's like my all time like favorite movie. Like it's probably not even my favorite movie out of this list of like B tier films. My favorite movie out of like the B tier films is probably Iron Man 3. But it's a good movie. Again, it's good. It's just not A tier good. I think we got Avengers. We got Avengers Infinity War, and that was kind of like the high point. But then Ant-Man and the Wasp and Captain Marvel, kind of mid. Avengers Endgame. We are nearing the end of this ranking, folks. Avengers Endgame, I put it as A tier. All right. I feel like I've said this before, and I will say it again. I will live by this statement. Avengers Endgame is not as good as Avengers Infinity War. Yes, the movie's 3 hours long. It doesn't feel 3 hours because of the pacing. Like, it's just so exciting. I'm on the edge of my seat. It doesn't feel like I'm watching a 3 hour movie. So the movie's got excellent pacing. It's got an excellent story. Although I do feel like the story was kind of predictable at times because it kind of did everything that we needed it to. It's like granted, we didn't really know exactly how the movie was going to play out, but we kind of knew what to expect. It's like, obviously, somehow the Avengers are going to bring everybody back to life and kind of make things like the way that they were. So yeah, I think going into Avengers Endgame, some of us might have had expectations, if that makes sense. But solid A tier film. It's a nice kind of like love letter to the entire Infinity Saga, really, and the MCU up to that point. Like we see everybody come together to fight Thanos. We get time travel, and all of the original 6 Avengers, with the exception of Thor, get a proper send off. Iron Man and Black Widow both end up sacrificing themselves to save humanity. Let's see. Hawkeye, he goes back into retirement, because Hawkeye, he tried to retire at the end of Age of Ultron, but then came out of retirement in Civil War and then was forced back into retirement at the end of Civil War. But then, of course, he lost his family, so he became Ronin. He was Ronin for 5 years, and now he is officially hung up his bow, hung up his sword, supposedly. So he goes into retirement. That's 3. Natasha Romanoff. Oh, Black. Oh, well, that's Black Widow. And so let's see. That's Iron Man, Black Widow, Hawkeye, Captain America, Steve Rogers. He goes and he lives his life. He goes and like lives his life with Peggy Carter in an alternate universe, I'm sure, and then he gives his shield to Sam Wilson. So we get a nice little sort of passing of the torch for Captain America. Hulk stays a smart Hulk. We do see Hulk again in the She-Hulk series. And then Thor just kind of goes off with the Guardians of the Galaxy. We have the Asgardians of the Galaxy, I guess. So this was kind of like Marvel's Super Bowl. Like Marvel, like you just won the Super Bowl. Hooray. If Avengers Infinity War was like the AFC and NFC championships, then Avengers Endgame is the Super Bowl. So yeah. And then, closing out Spider-Man Far From Home. I'll put his B tier because, thank you, Jake Gyllenhaal, Zendaya. It's a good movie. It's not all that great. Not all that great, but I think that it's hold on, sorry. Spider-Man Far From Home. Like I was saying, it's a good movie. It's won't say it's great. Jake Gyllenhaal showed up as Mysterio. We get a nice little character arc for Tony Stark, who is now mourning the loss of Iron Man, and it's like, okay, like his mentor and surrogate father, Iron Man, is gone. How do I fill the shoes of this guy? This is not God, but like, it's Iron Man. So, how do I fill his shoes? And then am I supposed to be filling his shoes? Like he's at this point probably like 17 maybe, like going into senior year of high school. It's the summertime, I'm on vacation, like I should be chilling. But then of course, he gets the glasses, the Edith glasses, even dead, I'm the hero, but yeah, we do get more of Spider-Man questioning his place in the world and whether or not he should be doing more to help out and to save the world, or should he just be like focusing on who he is, should he just be Peter Parker for a while? And this is something that we see come up again. Like they double down on these themes in Spider-Man No Way Home. Spider-Man No Way Home. I promise I'm going to like practice my speech before I record these episodes. But yeah, overall, solid beats here. I put it like alongside. I put maybe Homecoming, Far From Home, and maybe even No Way Home. I just put them all as like B tier films. I mean, they're not super great, but they're not like awful either. The kind of fun movies to rewatch every now and again. So, with all that said, folks, that is my official tier ranking for the Infinity Saga. Let me know in the comments down below. Do you agree? Where do you agree? Where do you disagree? Feel free to send me your tier lists and let me know if it is okay for me to kind of maybe post those tier lists on YouTube, either here on YouTube or on the Cobbs Corner Instagram. Definitely let me know. Thank you guys for tuning in to this video. I am definitely, for 2025, I'm going to be doing more of these kinds of uploads, these kinds of like sort of freestyle YouTube videos, tier lists, or maybe I'll do like rankings for movies, so like best to worst. And yeah, I mean, this is what you're going to see more of in 2025. Like I'm going to be doing more video podcasting, more audio and video. So let me know if this is something that you guys want to see more of in the future. With all that said, make sure that you like this video, comment, like this video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Make sure that you are, listening to the podcast. Give the podcast a 5-star rating on all listening platforms, and click that bell so you get notified whenever I upload new videos like this, so then you're the first to watch. You can watch it in the premiere. And, if you want to stay up to date on all things Cobb's Corner, then all you got to do is follow me on all social media. So that's Instagram, Threads, and TikTok. Follow me on TikTok before it gets banned. All right. So who knows? It might just be Instagram and Threads at some point. To stay updated on all things Cobb's Corner, all those links are in the show notes below. If you made it to the end of this episode, made it to the end of this video, excuse me, I greatly appreciate it. And click the video on the screen right now to listen to my most recent episode of Cobb's Corner. It is a complete banger of an episode. As always, I'll talk to all of you in the next video. Peace.